Bobby Thompson and Angelica Nicholson coming at you as usual without Ranard. So having a hard time getting guests to come on this little pot, even though, you know, we're so tiny, no one ever wants to come on. It seems like religion is such a taboo thing for so many people, right? They don't want to discuss it.
I second that. I think it's easier to be a spectator than a participant.
You know, it's I have some friends in high school who are really good people. You know, everything I say is with mixed emotions, right? They are good people, right? I think everyone wants to be a good person. And one of them was a close friend, a girl, right? It was a girl. We even dated briefly, but it's amazing to like to watch her bash on religion. Like she has absolutely zero hangups about bashing religion, right? Like how anyone who believes in this man in the sky is retarded. And the irony is I thought it too, right? And like, I don't have a doubt today. Like and there's nothing I can say when you see these posts come up. You can't say anything, even though I've made that leap. There's nothing I can say that'll make them make that leap. But sometimes I chime in. Once in a while, I'll say something. I'm just like, you know, I think you're going to change your tune one day, and hopefully it's not too late. You know, man, it's just so crazy. You know, and it's so obvious. Like if I'd have to say those people aren't seeking God, right? Like I had heard that before. I'd made before I switch sides, so to speak, right? Is that, you know, I'd heard that, you know, well, you're not seeking God. And they're like, whatever, you know, I'm not seeking God. Well, that's the truth. You know, I don't know your thoughts on that, but I think that has a lot to do with it. Yeah,
I think that's 100%. And part of the blindness comes from thinking that you don't need to. Like, why would you need to? You know, part of the repentance of sin is knowing that you have sin in the first place. And we're so comfortably numb with our just with our lifestyle and with our lack of penalty from our sin, that there is no need to look for anything beyond what we have.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, I agree. And you know,
it's like, oh yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say, when I think about all these influential people in history, you know, whether Plato, Aristotle, Copernicus, whoever it be, right? Anyone Einstein, anyone you think of genius or super intellect. I think all those people knew the truth, right? And they just took a side, in my opinion. Like that's my true belief today, is you had people on that, you know, whatever you want to call it, the Illuminati side, the dark principalities, whatever, you know, and then you had the good people, you know, the people on you know, God's side. And if you educate yourself, like if you go out and set yourself on educating yourself, I think you'll find the truth. If you just start reading book, you know, for me, it was like, I was wasting my years away. I was playing video games and I was focused on money. But the moment I started researching science, once I looked up at the skies, you know, I know I've said that a million times, but and then there was just once you see one way, you start more and more, they just start compounding.
And that's a tedious process, because in one sense, it's not our fault, but we were born into such a deception. But it is your fault once you choose not to. It's hard though, because often if you have a gentle personality or a caring personality, you want to give the benefit of the doubt. So whenever these conspiracy theories come up, you're like, oh, well, has to be an explanation for that. There has to be an explanation why NASA is so short on their answers or what have you. There has to be an explanation for something. But once you start accumulating evidence to the contrary, you have to, at some point, just make a decision. I know there's not many like murder cases or high-end criminal cases that get proven by what do you call the evidence that's speculative. But yeah, there are cases where there's so much speculation, so much evidence other than, let's say, DNA or photographic.
I know what you're talking about, and the word won't come to me. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it'll come to me too. But faith and science that parallels with faith is the same way. At some point, you know, people are like, oh, you can't prove the existence of God.
Circumstantial. There we go. Circumstantial evidence, right?
So, right. And at some point, there's so much circumstantial evidence that you have to be purposely denying.
Especially when it all aligns, right? Like that's the whole thing with flat Earth, is that what happens is when you start researching it, you have all this circumstantial evidence. You're like you there's not many facts about, there actually are facts about flat Earth. If you start looking at photos that can't exist and laser tests and trying to measure the curve, things like that.
Right.
But get into this, what won me first was the circumstantial evidence. You're like, when you look at all there's just a plethora of it and it all points the same place. Holy cow. He's under 10 now.
Yeah.
Setting records, man.
Yeah, no kidding. How are you guys?
Good. Good.
Yeah.
Shocked and awed by your presence.
Oh, stop. No, I got hooked on, I'm looking up, are you guys familiar with nootropics?
Yeah.
Right.
Joe Rogan's into them a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so
I'm not a big fan of his anymore. I used to be, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Ranard. Sorry.
All right. So you're not giving old Joe any love?
Well, I think he's serving the wrong team, right? Like I think before he got too famous, I think he was neutral, and and I think he made that crossover to the elite where like they just started paying him the big bucks, and yeah, he's serving those guys now. Yeah.
Yeah, so expect him to be like a little puppet.
Well, for years he was like, we never went to the moon. There's no way. And then all of a sudden he was like, of course we went to the moon. Of course. And then, all of a sudden him and Eddie aren't hanging out all the time. Eddie's not you could just see the shift there, right? He went from it. There's no way we went to the moon and to, of course we went. It was obviously, right?
Of course.
But the short answer, Angelica, is they're basically, when you think about like capsules, you have your prescription drugs up here, and then you got your supplements down here, and then nootropics are like right there, right below the prescription stuff right there. But the whole point of the nootropics is to improve your overall cognitive function. It helps with your creativity, your motivation, your mental acuity. So you're basically sharp. So there's a lot of foods, there's a lot of environmental factors, and of course social and mental crap that kind of impacts your brain's ability to function on all cylinders. And this, if you have like a good clean diet or lifestyle, you're able to exercise, drink a shitload of water. That's good. But then if you take these supplements or these nootropics, they basically give you like an additional like boost, just sharper. The effects can last anywhere from 45 minutes up to let's say 4 hours, depending on what supplements you're taking. I recently paid a guy who's a nootropics expert. This is the first time I've done something like this, but I wanted to get a consultation. So I paid him $175 for a 1 hour consultation on, different nootropic stacks that I can put together. And I'm very familiar with them. So everything that the guy was saying, I was like, yeah, I get it. I got it. What I didn't know is how to put them all together in a more of a holistic format. And so he was able to do it. So this is basically my little readout or printout right there. If you guys can see it. But it certainly helps me. Yeah. So this certainly helps me gauge what I should be doing and at what time for our optimum mental performance. So it's been working well for me. I've had over 20 plus concussions, and so I don't have any of the symptoms that everyone else has from concussions. And
did you just go? Did you used to just go running around smashing your head into walls, or like explain all these concussions? I never asked.
Yeah. So, man, it's just when you're training, we used to go really hard, and a lot of the guys were getting ready for pro and amateur fights. So there was that. Tons of wrestlers, Division I wrestlers. So the pickups, the slams, and then as soon as you get a concussion, you know that something's not right. But then your teammates are encouraging you to come on, man, you can push through it. One more round. And you're like, yeah, okay. So you do it. And man, the next day, you go into class and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to have it as a light day today. Yeah, bullshit. There's no such thing as a light roll or light days. So even though, so you feel like, okay, I'm somewhat there. I'm like a 3 out of 10, but I'm there. I'm just going to take it easy. And then another one happens. Once you get one, the second, third, fourth one. I mean, there are times where I've had multiple concussions in a week and I still kept going. It got to the point where I couldn't even talk. Like having anything come out of my mouth that was legible was impossible. I didn't even know what 2 + 2 was. So you look at cats like Muhammad Ali and you listen to him talk, man, that dude may as well have been a public speaker in comparison to me. So I fixed my problem and I got a protocol that works. And anyone who challenges, like, no, dude, I know 1,000 times more about this shit than you can ever imagine. It's not based off of theoretical bullshit either. So I'd say to anyone, get a cranial chiropractic adjustment, for I'd say do that for like 2 months. Cold showers, do a detox, a cleanse, and then once you do all of that, the inflammation in your body should be gone. Then you got to purify your blood. People don't do that at all. That's the problem why they continue to have the problems, is because their blood's not purified. And if you think about it, all the foods that you take in on a day-to-day basis, all the environmental crap and injuries, that stuff releases chemicals into your bloodstream. All of the nasty parasites and garbage that's in there, it goes into your bloodstream, which goes right up to your brain. So it's basically you, every time you eat shit food that's non-organic or GMO or processed or any of that garbage, imagine like someone dumping a pile of shit literally into your bloodstream, and then it's rushing right up to your brain. So when someone says, hey, you got shit for brains? Yeah, actually I do, because I put it in my body. But the first
time I got a sports massage before a fight, I just had one big knot right under my glute from doing not stretching before doing kicks. And so one of my lady friends did the deep massage in the knot. I had a headache for 3 days right before the fight. It must hurt so much that got released.
Oh, I see you got that Bible timeline in the. Sorry, I just saw your Bible. That is so cool. I was going to get that. No, I know exactly what it is. That's awesome.
Well, hold on, let me see if I can. Hold on, let me take you across my room here. I was actually going to buy it for you.
Is that a poster or something? What is that?
It is. Hold on, I'm trying to, because my phone goes backwards. It's like 5 feet long. So hold on, it's backwards. So let me, glad I put pants on today. So it's like, it goes from, can y'all see that? Or is it kind of weird?
I've seen this several times and almost, I should have pulled the trigger. I can't believe I haven't. I'm gonna
Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
All the way, and it gives the genealogy.
Yeah. All the way to today, right? To current time, right? Yeah.
And so what's crazy is you look at this and it's got, well, I'm trying to do it backwards here. So Adam and Eve, blah, 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 which is really cool to see where the genealogies overlap and who died when and what. And then it gets to the end, not the end, but our current. And so visually you look at this and you think, oh, there's this big gap left, right? But imagine you've all made like paper funnels before, like out of, like you cut a slit and then you make it into a cone. So imagine if you like cut this slit.
Oh, yeah.
And put that line to that line and made a cone versus a flat. That'd be a lot shorter time left, huh?
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I wanted to.
It is cool.
I had that in a spreadsheet.
Oh, definitely get it, because you can study that thing forever, and just then when you read any scriptures, you can see, like, for instance, like Daniel and Esther were at the same time. But if you just read your Bible, you would not put that together, you know?
Yeah, yeah, it's nice to have that timeline. Do you ever? I'm just curious. We'll come back to try to circle back to the nootropics thing. But I'm just curious. Do either of you ever watch either Ken Ham or Kent Hovind?
No.
Ken? Oh my gosh. I think so. Yeah. Well, Ken Ham is who did the Ark Encounter. He built that Ark in Kentucky. Yeah. So he is super knowledgeable. Like if you just list, and Kent Hovind is the same way. I've listened to both of those guys talk about evolution, like Darwinism and how they counter and geology, science, the scientific view versus the biblical view. And they look at it with alternative science, right? Well, they have science, like the Ken Ham guy at the Ark Encounter. I don't know how many millions he's worth. He's worth a lot, but he's kind of funneling it all and devoting it all to Christianity and proving Christianity is real. And he has multiple scientists on staff. I mean, probably like 60 or 100 or something like that. And these are legit scientists that argue biblical science, right? They sit there, they get into every fashion of science, every sliver of science, and they argue it from a scientific standpoint. And if you listen to it, and you listen to mainstream science, or you listen to their science, you listen to them break it down at an intellectual level. For me, biblical science wins. It works.
I think that the major factor separating biblical science and mainstream science is biblical science invites you to question it. Mainstream science condemns you for questioning it.
Yes, that's so true.
Yep.
We went to go see, when I went down to Florida for Christmas, I was going to drive my boys up to go see the Ark from Ham, but it was the main part in DC that was closed to COVID or whatever. I know it wasn't COVID, but it was like right before the inauguration, so we didn't get to go, but I would love to go. That would be so neat.
It was awesome. It was basically, they built the Ark to what he thought taking all the information he had and he built it to scale, and he built it out and proved that it could hold the number of animals that they did the science on it, right? And they went into like one of every kind of animal, and a kind of animal. It's pretty interesting. And then they determined that there's really only 1,700 kinds of animals, right? Because you got to think, you don't have to have insects, and you don't have to have fish, right? Anything in the water, right? So you're talking about land animals, and they actually had more than enough room. When you walk through the 3 levels and you see how they circulated air and how they fed them, and where the family slept, and it was. I really recommend going there. That was such a cool experience. We loved it. And then they have this massive restaurant that had some of the best food we'd ever had, and it was cheap. I mean, it was a big, awesome, cool. And then they have a zoo now that they're building around it. It's just awesome. Then they have a museum, which I didn't know the museum was there, because that was it's like on a different plot of land. So we missed the museum experience. But I do recommend going there. If you can get to Northern Kentucky, that was worth the trip. My daughter loved it. It's just so cool being in there. You feel like, he built it to those, like when you're walking through it, you feel like you're back in that time. It's an amazing feeling.
I don't know about you, but like I love doing projects and building and everything, but I'll start a project and I just get so overwhelmed with life. I'm like, I'm never going to finish this doghouse, right? Could you imagine being commissioned with the task of building an ark? You don't have electricity or saws or cars or nothing, and you're just cutting by hand. And I couldn't even comprehend how many times Noah had to be like, are you sure this is what we're doing?
Yeah. Ranard, what we were talking about before you came on is the fact of how hard it is to get someone to come on the show, or to come on the podcast. I've put the invite out several times to a lot of my friends who I either met through flat earth groups or most people are pretty shy about it. And even my Christian friend or my Christian non-flat earth friends or my non-Christian friends, I've extended the offer, and most people shy away from the types of discussions we have in here.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that has to do with literacy in both areas, either like flat earth or biblical, because everyone thinks of the question, well, what if someone asks me a question I don't know? But that has to get put aside in order to discuss, I believe. But I think that's probably most people's hangups, I would assume.
Well, you have to admit I'm ignorant. Like I'll be the first to say I'm just scratching the surface here, right? Like, but I'll argue what I know, but not argue. I'll discuss what I know, right, and learn. I want to learn, but it's just amazing how I had a conversation with one of my old students last weekend. We were rolling, and Christianity came up. I always bring it up, right? So he said, "Well, I don't think the purpose of Christianity is, whether Jesus was real or God's real. It's the morals." And I'm like, "Oh, you are so wrong. You could not be." He's like, "No, the important part to take away is the morals. Like that's the purpose of all religions." I'm like, "You are so wrong. You can't even imagine how wrong you are, because this is about getting to heaven, a new place. And morals don't cut it. Morals, that's good and all, but you have to believe." But I'll still love him as a friend. He's still a good friend. He has good morals. He's a good person, but it's interesting. It's interesting.
So that brings up an interesting question. Is it better to have someone who believes in Jesus but acts like a complete asshole and they're just a terrible person, or someone who does not believe in Jesus, but they have like the utmost sense of morality and ethics?
I think it depends. Are you asking because you're trying to hire a babysitter, or because they're on their deathbed? You know what I mean? Like
they're just, if right now, if we were to just do a side-by-side comparison and just say, okay, we're going to rank or judge this person based on, well, just who they are. One person, he identifies as a Christian, but he's a complete, what?
Right.
And the other the other person's an atheist, but does so much for humanity as a whole to uplift the overall consciousness, and then there's the mental and emotional well-being of others, but they don't believe. So
I think, like, for interaction, if I was needing someone to watch my kids after school, and they weren't a believer, but they knew CPR and were nice, I'd be like, sure, no problem. If I was going into, let's say, an exorcism with somebody, if someone's like, hey, my house is haunted, I'd rather take the mean Christian guy than the sweet atheist. But Jesus addresses this directly when he talks to the Pharisees, and he condemns them because he said, you're like whitewashed tombs. You're clean and presentable on the outside, but inside you carry death and dead man's bones. So, I would rather go with crude and Christian, because at least you're in the process of being refined. Otherwise, if you're just nice and not a believer, it's like pouring perfume into the cesspool, just to make it smell better.
But but theoretically, it shouldn't exist. I mean, theoretically, it shouldn't exist. It shouldn't exist, right? Like as a Christian, we're always refining ourselves. But I got angry today, and I got someone hit my car today, right? I'm like, just quick story. Chin and I went to Target. She wanted to run and get a coffee, so I did a circle, and I'm in between the parking lots. You can go both ways. I'm in my side clearly, and I'm in my side of the medium, and this guy coming towards me. We're both going real slow, and he just gradually crossed over the median, just scraped the side of my truck, right? Just, and I'm like, I got out and I was like, what the blank are you doing? And I slipped out, and I apologized. I didn't, because he's like, oh, I didn't see you. I'm like, you didn't see me I'm in a 4x4 truck. I'm like towering over you. And he's like, he goes, man, I didn't see you. And I said, all right. I said, man, I'm sorry, man. I just don't know how you hit me. Like, I'm like, but I was, he just, I lost my cool. Right. So we all do. And I did apologize, right, for losing my cool, but I'm so far from a perfect Christian, man. I'm trying, but there is no such thing as a perfect Christian. There was one, Christ, but yeah. So I know where you're going with that.
Yeah. And I think this was one of my reasons why I was very, very reluctant, and it has nothing to do with, it's like the labels. So I know that when I think about like the labels of Christianity, to me, it's supposed to be there should be a certain standard.
A caliber.
Yeah. Like I would expect people, especially people who have been walking in the faith for multiple years. It's like, dude, get your shit together. And it's like, well, what benefit has it actually provided? And I know that I hear the argument that, hey, I'd rather believe that there is a God than not believe, just to be on the safety side. So a lot of people hedge their bets. And that actually bothers me quite a bit, because I look at how I was, over the last, let's say, 30 years. And it's when it comes to like moral character. Now, again, we're all on our individual journey, but it was incredibly frustrating to me when I would see people and I'm like, how in the world are you a believer of Jesus Christ and you conduct yourself like that? And I'm not. And I do more for humanity as a whole in, let's say, 1 week than you can possibly do in 1 year. And so I'm always trying to push people to become better people. I'm like, look, man, whatever it takes for you to become a better human being in society, you really need to do it. And if you're claiming to be a Christian and you're conducting yourself in that way, then guess what, buddy? It's not working out for you. So, and that's one of the reasons why I honestly stopped going to church, because I don't honestly want to affiliate with those folks on a day-to-day basis. And so, like this morning, Leanne and I woke up and she was just like, or actually I said to her, I said, Lee, quite honestly, I have no desire to go to church. I said, we can listen in and just hear the sermon. But as far as like, being around everyone over there, I said, I have zero desire. I said, I feel like every time that I go there, it's not enriching for me. I don't feel empowered. I don't feel anything except for I wish I was at home, and it would be a better use of my time. So anyway, that's kind of like where I'm at with the whole Christianity and just being a good moral person. And quite honestly, I don't believe that it's good enough to believe. I believe that someone's actions should also correlate with their belief system. Otherwise, anyone can say anything.
I feel very strongly that marriage is used so much as a type and shadow of both our commitment here to each other and of heaven as well, because we're all married, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you can, before you got married and you're dating, you can act married, right? You can cook for someone, clean for someone, treat them nice, pick them up, drive them around, go on dates, whatever. But until you actually are married, those are just behaviors. That would be the equivalent, let's say, of morals in an unbeliever. You can act as married as you want to be, but you're not married. You're just being nice. You're putting your best foot forward. As soon as you get married and that covenant happens, then the ugly comes out. And I believe as Christians, most of us have either reached that point or are still in that point or trying to get out of that point. And that's when I believe you got to really buckle down. And then bringing someone flowers doesn't cut it anymore. You got to get through the hard things like funerals and sicknesses and dealing with each other's sins. Unfortunately, most comfortable or weak or Christians that are still on the milk and not on the meat, as the scripture says, have just stopped at that superficial level of the honeymoon or the dating, and they haven't gotten into the becoming one with the word. And that's, I think, the difference between when you see someone who's very matured in Christ spiritually, regardless of their age, but they just have just a patience. And typically you think of that as older people, right? Like, I say old. What's old? Old's like 30 years older than what you currently are, right? So wherever you are, like 30 years old, you see that in people and you're like, wow, they're the perfect grandma. They're the most teaching, instructionable grandpa. Well, that has come through the marriage, almost like, when you go through counseling or you go through, like, a pastor will sit you down and get through those rough spots in marriage. And what the world mostly sees is the people who stop at that honeymoon stage in marriage and they don't have anything. So I think often that's why we're seen as just very comfortable, lacking commitment, and the world seems like they can woo you more because they're still in the dating mode. They're in the putting the best foot forward, and you know what I mean? So I think the marriage, the trials that we face in marriage, for us to put our nose to the grindstone and go through it, will turn into our testimony to the outside world. And if not, we're no better than the outside world. In fact, they're more appealing because they just still treat people nice.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, if I had my own little here's the deal is when I look at it right here, and I can't help because I've studied other religions and I see like the conduct of certain people, and this is ultimately what I see because I can't judge someone by their heart or their intentions. I don't know what that is, but when I look at, let's say, I know a lot of people who practice Buddhism or Taoism, and then there's they act in a particular way. They actually, live that lifestyle right there. Now, I already, even by me saying this, I know inherently it's coming across very biased. So when I look at the lifestyle, like, hey, I'm adopting this belief system. I believe in Buddhism. I believe in Confucianism. I believe in Taoism. I believe in whatever, or Christianity, Judaism. Well, that means that your conduct should be in alignment with it. Like if I had to personally, if there was a way to visualize Christianity and all these different religions, or let's just say belief systems, and we can only do it based on the like a visual representation of the people practicing it right there. Christianity would be a dead last for me. And so
Go ahead. I'm just playing with something. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm listening.
Yeah. So Christianity for me would be a dead last. And that's the problem that I personally have, is I don't believe faith is good enough. I think, there has to be action that goes along with it. So
well, James said faith without works is dead. You have to.
Wait, say it again.
James, I think not James 5:16. It's in James though. He says faith without works is dead.
Well,
and then
isn't that the biggest difference between Catholicism and Christianity? Catholicism demands faith and works, and Christianity just demands just faith.
For salvation, yes. For salvation, yes, but not for sanctification. So whereas, for instance, Catholicism or some other religions, you can lose. They claim that you can lose your salvation if your works don't meet a certain requirement, whatever prerequisite they set. Whereas in a Jesus believer, you cannot lose your salvation, but your, such as the Bema seat, you'll be judged based on your good works. And Jesus tells us too that you will know them by their fruits. And it's not just fruits of your hands, but fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, long suffering. So you should know other believers by their fruit.
Right.
And so we should be able to identify each other by that. And then he also tells us to let your works shine, let the world see your good works, so that your light may shine before men. So he definitely doesn't want us sitting on our hands, but to make it very clear that you can't be saved by your works. I think that's where the other religions, like, if you don't keep up with the good works, you're always living in that constant pool of, am I saved today? Am I not saved today?
Right. Yeah, I think but you got to think the motivation. Fear is a strong driver in Christianity. If you don't do this, then, and here comes the big chop. And I wonder, what would the adoption rate be, or the really the adoption rate, or how if they didn't have that, if you don't believe this, then you're going to go to hell. You're going to have a life of total damnation. Well, there's a fear tactic that's being utilized in order to get people to believe, in Christianity.
I'm not sure about hell, right? Like, I think hell's like a Catholic concept. If I like purgatory and hell, I'm not sure about. Are you?
Purgatory is.
It's purgatory. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a problem with it, right? Like, I know it's, I don't have for me, there's enough evidence, right? Like, for me, there's enough evidence, and it's a simple choice, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with it to me. Like, God has a right to judge us, right? And we don't have a right to just live with him in his house, right? Like, you have to earn that right. It's just, I don't see anything wrong with it. I mean, he just laid out his rules and just said, look, if you want to live with me in my house, these are the rules. And if you don't respect me as your creator and God and father, then you're not going to live in my house. And if that's hell, oh well. But for me, there's enough evidence. Like, for me, there was unquestionably enough evidence. I don't know. I understand it, right? Like, man has to have free will. He has to have the choice. And he has to choose God. But yeah, just like, we talked about this once before, Ranard, is when 33% of his angels turned against him, right? Like, if I had 33% of my children turn against me, I would have a test, right? Like, I'd be like, hey guys, no more free tickets to heaven now. Now, there's guys out here trying to kill me right now. There's a test before you get to heaven, because I got to make sure that everyone's agrees with my morals and agrees with my standards. So,
especially if those angels were trying to convince the other siblings to join him.
Yes. Yeah. So when I think the reason you can look at it that way is you're not looking at the bigger picture. When I look at the bigger picture of what happened, like what led to this, that war that took place between the angels, and then you had the Nephilim, and you had the what's the word for it? The blood, the defiled blood, or the corrupted blood, right?
Yeah.
When I look at all that and put it all together, then I'm like, yeah, I don't have a problem with this. We're all sinners. We were all corrupted. And if you don't ask for forgiveness and ask to be fixed, because some people are choosing this life of sin, right? Like basically Satan is in control. You look at the way the whole game played out. When you look at it from a high level, And some people are choosing Satan, right? They're saying, well, I like this life. I don't want to. Basically, I think there's people out there. There are people where, and I have no idea the percentage, but let's say people know the rapture is coming, right? And
Right.
you know, and there's people saying, well, I wish it wouldn't, because there's things I want to do, right? Like I want to drive this car, and I want to have this house, and I want to spend this money, and I want to fly this jet, right? And that's choosing the wrong side, right? So yeah, I think for me, it just makes sense. I know for some people it doesn't, but for me it does.
I think that the fear of it, so there's two separate extremes on this. The word tells us that perfect love casts out fear. I've never experienced perfect love other than from God, because we can't get it from a spouse or even from a child. You know, the first time your kid says, I hate you, you're like, well, that's not that perfect, right? So the only place that we can experience perfect love is from God. But if we have fear, we have to decide, is it fear because I'm disobeying God, one, or is it fear of man? So there are two separate fears for there. And to have a healthy fear, a healthy respect, I mean, it's like getting a butt whooping for stealing something from your parents. Like, yeah, you should have a fear of that because you disobeyed the house rule. So if we have fear of going to hell, I don't believe that's a bad thing whatsoever, but perfect love cast out fear, and that would be the fear of man, people's opinions. But like you were saying, Bobby, I want to have this, own this. Well, that's the opinion of a person, and you're fearing not gleaning that attention from there. I think the fear of penalty, for me as a mom, is best comprehended if you have more than one kid in your house. And Ranard, your kids are younger, right, or middle-aged?
What are they? 8 and 10.
8 and 10. And then your little princess, she's just so like innocent still, right? With cheeks and those deer eyes. So when my kids were younger, you know, you always have this perfect parenting plan until you have kids, and then you just keep lowering your standards, right? And so my oldest son, he went through the phase, I guess you would call it. But where
I couldn't hear you. What phase?
Well, it's just the phase, you know, we're all parents like hope it's I say a phase because I hope it's over. I don't know, because he's an adult now, so he only tells me certain things like I love you, mom, but you know, I don't know all the details. It's probably good. But there was a time when he had really severe anger issues, like bad. I was like, this is unacceptable in my house, to the point where he would like yank on his younger brother's arm to the point where it would have come out of the socket if I didn't intervene. You would like hit him with sticks. He'd be kicking the cat, like mean, right? And if he was an only child, I would have taken different parenting steps than if there were other siblings in the house, because of their innocence comparatively based on age and their inability to defend themselves against him, who was 5-6 years older, bigger, stronger, you know, and he's starting to get his little mustache and stuff. There are more extreme punishments that I had to give him to separate him from the two younger ones who weren't, they shouldn't have had to contend with that. Like, such as, I mean, we live out here in the country, and I made him walk to town to go find a place to stay, because I said, you got to get out. Like, you cannot sleep here tonight. And I think he was like 15 at the time or whatever. And I crossed my fingers that I wouldn't get CPS called me, but he packed his little backpack and walked down the highway, and he made it like 15 miles before someone gave him a ride. And I didn't know where he was for the weekend. I mean, I was concerned, but also I knew, like the Bible says, spare the rod, spoil the child. I had to intervene very aggressively in order for him to take that seriously. Because if I didn't put that fear into him, he was like, it's going to be dark soon. Well, maybe, you know, maybe he shouldn't have.
I thought about that before, buddy.
Yeah, and out here when it gets dark, our mean things are on 4 legs, you know, and so. But that's the consequence you got to deal with, right? Because you have harassed your 2 younger brothers for so long. So, and I say all this because, as Christians, if we're all on the same same earth together, and there are some that are misbehaving against, causing offenses against, then God has no choice but to separate the offenders in such an aggressive manner and give the what for. Like, if you don't stop doing this, this will be the consequence, whether it's car accident or giving yourself over to the drunkenness or being in a bad place at a bad time and getting shot. You know, those are all things that fear would be just a discipline of our choosing action. So I think we just have to boil it down where that fear is coming from.
Yeah. And I think, like, so I used to have an issue with here, and I think this may be one of the things that trips you up, Ranard, is I used to have an issue with Christianity because in my head I said, well, that's not fair. What about people that grew up in the Amazon and was never educated about Christianity? Like, they're going to hell because they didn't have the option to know. But I think that what happens with those people is they'll be given the choice, right? Like, whether that be during the tribulation or whether that be when they die, whether that they'll be given that choice and say they will be educated. Where the problem comes in is where those of us that were educated and then refused, right? Because again, for me, there's so much evidence. If you were to look at how many people in this world, what percentage of people in this world follow Abrahamic religions, you know, people say, well, there's a lot of religions. No, not really. Not when you look at how much is dominant. How is it that like 80% of the world came to be dominated by Abrahamic religions? And God said, you know, spread this out everywhere, share it with everyone. That was his intent. So if someone didn't get that word, I don't think that I'd like to believe that they're not going to get penalized for that they'll have they'll be told in the end, or they'll have during the tribulation. But if you were educated and you refused, that's another problem. And more than likely what'll happen, and Angelica certainly knows better than me, or I believe that. But what I think will happen is that if you were educated or saw that and chose not to learn more about that, I think you got to go through the tribulation, and that's going to be a tough time because you chose to doubt when all this evidence was there for anyone that was searching. It's just like that movie, A Case for Christ. If you do research, there is, how could all these people in the world believe this old book unless there weren't the things that had to have happened at that time had to have been mind-bending. It had to have been just paramount. It had to be for all this to get written down. It's the most written book in history. It's the most regurgitated stories in history. It's like it had to have had truth. And then you find all these archaeological sites. They've found where Sodom and Gomorrah is. They found they believe they found the Ark on Mount Ararat. They believe so many of these. I all the time look up biblical archaeological finds, and there are so many. They find coins with inscriptions of kings, whatever they call the people that stamp things for the king, or they have a name for that. I can't remember. But
and the chariot wheels at the bottom of the Red Sea.
Yeah, awesome. There's so much evidence. There's so much. So not only do you have all these. The most reprinted book of history, which they tried to stomp out. Like they tried to burn all these books. They couldn't. You couldn't suppress it. People went underground with their religion. And through all that, it made it. And then you have all that archaeological evidence, and you have, for me, and I spent a lot of time researching that. It's a no-brainer for me. I realize it's. I had a hard time with it until I just went nuts for years just researching. Evidence, everything from archaeological to reading the Bible, actually taking the time to read it. And yeah.
And when you think that people gave their life for this book, there's not many other entities in this world that would command a man's courage or a woman's courage to give up their life, for itself. So there's.
Yeah, we have it easy today. We're the most spoiled of Christians. All you had to do is do your homework. We got a real simple test. there's times when people just to be Christians, you had to have so much faith that you were going to get burned at the stake if you got caught. Imagine that's what it took for Christianity to make it to us who get it freely and get a free choice, that they and their family members ran the risk of being burned alive at a stake just so we could know about it today. To me, that's amazing, right? Like
we have the open book test, and there's still people that aren't going to pass.
Yeah.
Like,
when I think about that, for me, it's a no-brainer for me. It really is. And when I get not being 100% believer. It took me time, but the only thing I say is spend more time researching. It's the most important thing. You know, if you dig in deep enough, you will either come to 100% belief. For me, that's the only option. I don't understand how people come to disbelief, but there's more than enough evidence for me.
You know what I think is one of the biggest lies the enemy says to bring people to disbelief is because you cannot step in front of the cross and remain the same. You either have to be broken to the core, or you have to become so hardened that you can turn your face upon it. And often it's our own sins, because the cross exposes that, right? And so when the cross exposes your sin, you can either break down and ask for forgiveness and realize just how offensive you've been, or you can grow hard and deny everything, whether you justify it or say that whether you take on this narcissistic type of they deserved it type of, either way, you're gonna go away from the cross, extreme one or the other. And I think when people say they've studied and they've come to disbelieve, I would reckon that they came face to face with their sins, and instead of letting it break them, it let them harden their hearts instead, like a protective.
Yeah, I just think it's so cool. How easy is it? Like, the only thing you have to do is accept Jesus Christ. I mean, like, it's so easy. It's the easiest test in the world. And if anyone has a hard time with that, they just didn't do it. Like, if I were trying to lead someone, and I'm not saying I'm the best at it, I'm just saying it's the only way I know how. It's the only way my brain. But I would just say, first, come to the conclusion that there's a God. I knew that when I started studying the moon and stars. Like, that's not possible in an explosion. That's not. That's intelligent design. DNA is intelligent design. The fact that our body has a language and an interpreter, right? Like, if organisms would just all be random, blobs of organisms, right? It would just be like, if it were going to happen. But here you have this language that's this DNA that you can even modify it. It's actually it's like language. It's clearly readable. And there had to be, that DNA had to develop, but it had to have an interpreter. It had to have in its design, there had to be an interpreter that says this means that all that is intelligent design. And that's the first thing you have to figure out, is that we live in a system of intelligent design. That, to me, I don't think that any genius would dispute that. And if you do dispute that, you haven't researched enough. Clearly, we live in a system of intelligent design. And if you have intelligent design, you have a creator. And then if you have a creator and you start looking at science, and the science matches the oldest book. And then when you go back to, because what you have is Christianity and Sumerian, it's married. Everything, those stories all parallel up. Like, people may not like hearing that. I think that some of Sumerian turn into folklore. I believe that because you didn't have modern language until the Hebrews, right? Like, that's when you had clearly documented that could be passed down generation to generation. There was a lot lost in translation. We believe we interpreted Sumerian, but nonetheless, the two corroborate each other. And the Sumerians said they were here you have the first civilization on earth, and they said they were created by gods and taught about the stars, about time, how to write, right, to keep records. And to me, it all corroborates itself. Like, there's no doubt in my head. Do you ever do you ever? I'm just curious, Angelica or Ranard, do either of you ever study like pre-biblical and go back to like studying Sumerian stuff? If you haven't, oh man, I recommend it. It's pretty interesting.
I haven't yet because I feel like if I add anything else, any more rabbit trails to my brain, I'm not going to be able to focus on any of them. So you might have to be the representative for that and tell us what you know.
I have a terrible memory, right? Like I watch these things again and again and again, and at best I retain 10%. Like if I watch them fresh, I'm pretty good about it. But I can tell you that it is fascinating. And I always, YouTube Sumerian culture, Sumerian history, Sumerian religion, Sumerian whatever. And you can focus on one of two things. You can focus on the parallels or you can focus on the differences. I focus on the parallels, and it's like 100 lotto tickets. You had the ark builder. Instead of Noah, it was Utnapishtim. You had his children on the ark with him. He landed on a mountain. He landed on Mount Ararat, the same mountain. Do you know in Sumerian history, what I'm about to tell you is true and verifiable. I wouldn't just throw it out there and make it up. In Sumerian history, in documented Sumerian history, man was created by the gods in the Garden of Eden, and a woman was taken from his rib and made. This is in Sumerian history. That is honestly and truly in Sumerian history. From every Sumerian scholar I have watched, they've all said that's a standard. And a lot of this comes out of the Enuma Elish, and to read it is fascinating. Like the same garden, right? So it was those people coming out of Sumeria. That was Noah's and Moses's grandparents, great grandparents. That was before they were known as Hebrews or Israelites, right? That's when they was traveling through the Mesopotamia, right, and ended up in Israel, and later became known as Israelite. To me, but it is fascinating. If you haven't gone that route, it's fun. You wouldn't regret it. It wouldn't change your beliefs. I can tell it didn't change mine. For me, it only reinforced them. And I started. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Well, I started studying other religions, right? Like I just started. They have this one really cool channel on YouTube. I can't think of the name of it. I have it saved, but they put all these religions in like little 15 to 30 minute cartoons. And they tell all the beliefs of it. And I watched like 30 of them on there. Everything from, American Indians to South Americans to the people of Peru and a lot of them shared the same exact beliefs. They had the flood story. They had giants, a battle with giants, Nephilim, right? They had, you had in Egypt, in Mesopotamia and in Ecuador, you had essentially Gilgamesh. You had the same dude, right? The same depiction, the same picture that you had of because Marduk and Gilgamesh were the same people, just translated names. And he's mentioned in the Bible, and then the same picture he has in Egypt is the same picture, the same engraving he has in Ecuador. And you start looking at stuff like this, and to me, all these religions just validate each other, right? And then you have stories like even the Norse, where you look at Norse mythology and you have the same parallels. You have a flood story, you have a battle with giants, and when you start looking at the players in it, like Jesus would be half God, half man, right? Well, Thor was half God, half man. You have all these same parallels, and I wish I could remember all of it now. My memory is just not good enough. One day I'm going to write it all down so we can just go through it, but you would be impressed if you just go through and start looking at the parallels. To me, they're all just stories that what the Hebrews did differently was that they were great scholars and they wrote everything down. Whereas what happened with Ecuador and Norse and other religions, and why we call them mythologies, is they didn't document it well. So it became lore, and it got a little bit changed as it went from generation to generation, because we're talking about 6,000 years.
So based on what you just said, because I've been trying to piece it, not that I need to, because I'm not going to be here, but for knowledge to lay out for people that are left behind. I've been thinking a lot about the Antichrist signs, and there's always people pointing to it's going to be this president or that president, but the more and more you study it, the more number one on the top 10 list comes out to be Nimrod, right? Because he fits all these scriptures. He one who was, is no more, and will be again, right? And then they say, Jesus says, if they say, look, he's in the desert, do not go. They say, look, if he's in the inner chamber, do not go, right? So he has all these things. And I was thinking about all the carved images that you have of Nimrod, Gilgamesh, like all his different personas of him holding the lion and whatnot. And somebody on a different podcast had put together some of these dots that when he comes on the scene, he's going to not deny scriptures. He's going to explain how they've been misinterpreted. So, for instance, instead of saying Jesus never existed, be able to say Jesus came as a false prophet and he was crucified because he was false. But I'm here now. I'm the true one, right? Otherwise, if he wouldn't have been crucified otherwise. And they're going to have all these, like how you have there, the depictions, the carvings, and all these people who are going to be easily impressed and not saved from deception are going to look at that and say, oh, they foretold of his coming. All of these history books, all these different civilizations, they foretold of him coming, right? Because our Bible foretold of Jesus coming in great detail, but they're not going to use the Bible as that. They're going to look at all these carvings, all the Egyptian hieroglyphics, and say, there he is, the one we've been waiting for. And so it's just crazy to me that even though we're looking at it in hindsight 2020, for everyone else who's going to be under the deception, they're going to be thinking this was a foreshadowing, not a rewrite of history.
Yeah. And
it's going to be in so many different languages. It's going to be hard for them to say it's not the Messiah.
Yeah. So here I am looking at this. There's two different texts that most of this comes out of, is the Enuma Elish. And I don't know if you know, but arguably the oldest book in his, well, they claim it is the oldest book, right? Not records, but the oldest book is the Epic of Gilgamesh, right? But in the Enuma Elish, you have God creating man out of clay and blood of a god they killed. They had to kill this god called, I can't remember his name, but it started with a Q, like Kwanzu or something like that. But anyway, they killed a god. They took this, and then from this dude of clay, they made the first man to serve the gods. You can see much smaller, and he was made in Eden, a Sumerian word which means flat terrain. Eden means, and in the Epic of Gilgamesh, Eden is mentioned as a garden of the gods located in Mesopotamia between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And when you read this stuff, it is absolutely amazing. And for me, it cracks me up that people go, oh, the Bible stole from. I'm like, stole from? It's corroborated. Can't you look at this one of two ways? They stole from, or it's corroborated. Here you had this book that nobody believed, and now you found an older source where they were writing in clay, and they're telling the same exact story. And one of the differences is that the Mesopotamians said, the Sumerians, they wrote in their historical records that, now who would write this? Here you have the first civilization that sprang out of nowhere, and they know how to keep time. They know how to keep records. They know how to agriculture. And they have a part in there where they said, we were created by our gods and they taught us these things. So you have the very first civilization that we have ever found. And this is undisputed. The oldest civilization is Sumerians. And they kept records. And in their records, they said they were created by their gods. And there's other records that say that. This not only is that in the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Gilgamesh, but absolutely, if you haven't read it, it's phenomenal. And I could go on and on. Like other parallels are that, and I keep a spreadsheet of parallels. They had this great flood, and that great flood is also in the Akkadian flood myth, not just Sumerians. The Akkadians believed it as well. And Ziusudra depending if it's Sumerian or Akkadian, it's either Ziasudra or Utnapishtim. He preserved all the animals, and they landed on a mountain. It was Mount Ararat as well. Baal. I thought that was, Baal is he was the son of God, right? And because they called God the highest God, or God, Anu, and then essentially you'd have angels, right? And his children, but one of his children was called Baal. I mean, that's crazy. But Baal's other name was Marduk. So he became Baal later. But I could sit there and go through this stuff. You had this war with giants. You had Gilgamesh was half man and half God. You also had the Tower of Babel in Sumerian. In the Sumerian records, you have the Tower of Babel as well. And then I went into the Norse mythology. Well, I don't want to dominate but I could just sit here all day and talk about. I went through the Norse and made comparisons: Aztec, Egyptians, Greek, the Incans, There's religions and people like from South America. I don't even know how to pronounce. Jipohans, Kaingangs, Incans, Urkokaris, Mapuches, but they all had the flood story. Every single one of them, right? So,
you know what just came to mind as you were talking there? Remember when God called Moses out of the burning bush to go back to Egypt to set his people free? And obviously, we know how many different gods the Egyptians had, right? Like one for every problem that they had. And so do you remember when Moses asked him, he says, well, who should I tell them sent me? And he says, I am. Tell them that I am sent you, which just gives me chills, because when you think of all these gods that people gave different names to and reiterated for different civilians, for Yahweh to say, just tell them the I am, just trumps everything that they could be wrestling with here.
Yeah, and check this out. You would say, well, Hindu's a major religion, right? Like Hindu, that's a pretty big one that competes with Christianity, mm-hmm. right? Oh, yeah. Well, did you know in Hinduism, man was made from clay? Man was made. What are the odds from that? And did you know Koreans? So the Korean religion as well, called Sangut, Koreans believe man was made from clay. I mean, how does this same story, and they also, both of them had the flood story as well. So Hindus have the flood story and the ark story, as do Koreans have the flood story as well, as do Malaysians, Filipinos, and their own religion. So Greeks believed in man was made from clay. Prometheus and Athena fashioned man from clay. You have religion after religion after religion. The Polynesians, the Laos believed that mans were fashioned from mud or clay. Hawaiians believe the same things. So as you start going through, American Indians. Now here you have, we thought we discovered America how many years ago? Whatever year, I don't know. I failed. I didn't pay attention.
1492, Columbus sailed. Yeah, 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Okay, so why, if here, America and Mesopotamia were separated? Did you know that American Indians believed that the earth was fashioned in 6 days, and on the seventh, Yova, sounds a lot like Yahweh. Do you know what they called their god? Yova. I can pull this up right now. You can go to Cherokee creation myths. Cherokee also believed there was a great flood. There was an ark. Man was made from clay. The earth is suspended at four corners. It was built in 6 days. On the seventh, Yova rested. The sky is of solid rock. There's another world beneath us, Sheol. And earth was populated by one man and one woman. When you start going through all these different religions, you'll come to find that Christianity is actually corroborated again and again and again and again. The same story made it to continent after continent. How did Cherokees come up with that, right? I mean, are you saying that Cherokees were Hebrews? Is that what we're, that's what you'd have to say for that story to an American Indian to have that.
Have you guys ever seen those maps? I'm trying to think of what they were called, but if you take all the continents and piece them together, they all fit.
Was that Pangea?
Right?
Like, right? Is that
yeah, like if you take out the ocean, right?
Yeah.
So the curves, right, fit all together. And when you look at that in, let's say, junior high or high school, wherever you learn that, you think, oh, this is just crazy. Or it confirms that we were here for billions and billions, whatever. But if you think that our Earth really was like that, and then when the flood happened, the sky opened up and the fountains broke through from the bottom, it would absolutely make sense that it was one landmass and then it broke, right? After the flood, and when the waters receded, then we have all these different continents. And when you think that, so obviously Noah and his 3 sons, they would have all been of the same, is nationality the right word? They would have been the same genetics, but their wives didn't have. You would have had probably an Asian wife, an African wife, and then like a European type wife. So when you went from the flood, right, Noah, one family, but then when they separated, they would have all had the same understanding of creation. For all, now you have Orientals, Africans, and Europeans all now have the same great 1,000 times grandpa, right? So I mean, it would make sense that Indians would have the same understanding of history as Puerto Ricans and everything else. We all came off the ark together.
Yeah. I mean, but just to think about that, right? To think that the Cherokee Indians, I mean, how could they have a belief in a firmament, 6 days to create the earth, 7th day, their God named Yahweh, rested, an ark, a flood story and an ark story, man made from clay. This is the beliefs of the Cherokee Indians. You can research this. You can Google this. There's articles, books were written, 500 years ago that documented all this.
So was this before Christianity or after Christianity?
Well, it depends when you, I mean, there.
Do you mean like Hebrew and Israelite, or like Christ?
Christ. Before the Bible was written, because the Bible was written after Christ died. So I'm wondering.
New Testament.
Yes, the New Testament. So yeah. I'm wondering, all these beliefs, was it before Christ or afterwards? Because if it was afterwards, then that could be more or less like an indoctrination, or you can easily manipulate people to believe whatever you want, especially for people who were not very intellectually enlightened. It's an easier case. But if it was before, that's impressive.
Well, I mean, how are you getting this story to people 500 to 600 years ago? And that's only when we discovered the story, right? Like they already had this belief. And how far does that belief go back? Like we don't know. I mean, as far as they were Cherokee Indians, I mean, you could research that, like what you're saying, forever, like, and might never know when they got that belief system. For me, the more amazing part is that you have the same belief system all around the world. And we look at it like, see, without doing enough research, you'll go, well, there's thousands of religions. Yeah, they are. The Hindus believe the same things. They got a flood story, an ark story, man made from clay. And then you look at Cherokees, they even have more similarities. They have the firmament as well, 7 days of creation. On the 7th day, their God, Yahweh, rested. You have, when you start looking at all these different religions and you start looking at the similarities, like just real quickly, touch on Norse. A couple things about Norse. The Norse has the firmament. They have a firmament. Where do the gods live? They live above us. Instead of calling it heaven, they call it Asgard. What's below it? Hell. Hell is below us in the Norse mythology. In Norse mythology, there's angels with wings that ride horses into battle, known as Valkyries. You have that in Christianity. And then there was a battle between the gods and the giants. They had the same battle in Christianity. You have the flood story. And in the final battle of good and evil, there's a battle between a serpent, right, named Jormungandr, right? Here, so you have the serpent, and then in the end, they have a prophecy in Norse mythology. In the end, giants will gather for one last battle, and the world will be consumed with fire. This is their belief system. What are the odds? And that's called, the name of that is called Ragnarok, right? And that's what they call it. And then you have humans are made from, decomposed trees, right? Basically clay, dirt, earth, right? And then, so for me, when you look at all this stuff, I see nothing but parallels. They just didn't, like, for me, Norse was a people who didn't document, because everything, their stories were all lore. It was just father told the son, father told the son, father told the son. So you had a different way of living. You had wanderers, right? You had Vikings. You had people just, so their religion became a religion of lore, whereas you had the Israelites, that what the main difference and why that became the predominant Christianity, Abrahamic religion, is because they were so good at documenting, right? They documented the Bible but it was the same story to me.
If I turn my phone sideways, do you guys see it sideways?
No, I see you.
Okay,
upright.
hold on. So I'm gonna take you over to this chart here. You probably saw this on the advertisement thing if you were thinking about getting it. Hold on. Is that sideways to you guys? Wait, let me go upside down. That way. Hold on. Okay. So, is that upside down?
I mean, we can read it. It's fine to me.
Okay.
Yeah,
so, wait, hold on. Let me flip one more time. Let me try that. I think it's still upside down.
Well, it's just reading it sideways. It's fine.
Oh, okay. So Adam and Eve. Let me try that. Adam and Eve.
Yep.
All the way down here to Methuselah. I don't know if you can see that right there. So Methuselah was alive. So Methuselah here was alive during Adam and Eve. So let's just assume that they talked to each other at some point during all this. Methuselah, the oldest man, died the day of the flood. Shem, Noah's son, was alive. So he obviously got off the ark and was alive down here to Abraham and Isaac. So, and Abraham, as we know, is Moses, who penned the Torah, the first 5 books, was his great grandfather. So between Adam and Eve, so we're assuming these guys all talked at some point. Adam and Eve could have, from their very own mouths, told Methuselah everything that happened in the Garden of Eden. Because remember, they walked with God, like literally in the garden, right? We got kicked out. Eve messed up real bad. It was bad, right? Methuselah's like, oh, you guys are dumb. Methuselah talks to Shem, who gets off the ark, and here's Moses' granddad. So, I mean, so even if it's just verbal, this is like third-hand knowledge from people who probably would not have messed up the details, you would think. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Especially if it's divinely protected. So even from Moses down here, we think there's such a big gap. And time-wise, yes, but it's really three people that would have had to just keep the details right.
Yeah.
And that's even without the Holy Spirit telling them what to write. That's just, oh yeah, my grandpa Adam and Eve told me. So I think that and obviously the civilizations that spread out from there, they would have also talked to Methuselah and Shem and everyone else along the way also.
Yeah. Oh, we lost Angelica. All right, should be back. So rejoin. But yeah, you know, I'm fascinated with studying other religions, and I've studied now, at least to some extent. Man, I don't know, 30 or 40 religions, and so far every one that I've delved into,
yeah,
some of them have amazing parallels. They tell the same story. So the majority of people are Abrahamic religions, and the ones that aren't have, if not the identical story, most of the same stories. And the only thing telling us differently that's kind of trying to bend those stories is science, right? Like science will say, there wasn't a great flood 6,000 years ago. Yet all these religions all around the world say there was. And then when you listen to some scientists that are biblical creationists as well, they'll go, no, this science can be interpreted this way. There could have been, actually, they interpret it that there was, right? Like watch some of Ken Ham's scientists. You know, these are people out there that are reputable scientists that went to college like anyone else, have master's degrees, you know, and I think they have as much right to interpret geology as any other, you know, scientist.
Right. Yeah. It seems like now, as I'm going through, and I'm on a different, like I said, I'm just traveling down a different path when it comes to Christianity. And right now I'm suspending my entire belief system. The only thing that hasn't changed is I do believe in a God, 100%. That has not changed.
So what's and you know, you and I are always gonna be boys no matter what. It doesn't matter. You know, but I'm just curious, like, so what's changed, right, to make Christianity have less of a, you know?
It's not so much that it's low on the totem pole as far as beliefs. Anytime that I'm learning something, I approach it in a very unbiased way. And I do, fortunately, have the ability to suspend my belief system temporarily while I learn about something else, to make sure that it's not being influenced because, I'm a Christian, so I have to look at it in this Christian way. No, I don't do it that way, because I wouldn't honor nor respect someone who actually did. And so I want to look at the evidence. I want to look at the information and draw my own conclusions. And I do look at other sources to see if there is any validity in what other people are saying. I do believe that there is some truths from different sources, from a variety of sources. I just don't know what it is. The reality is I wasn't there. And so I know that no one can ever say that they've read the entire Bible, and it's been bastardized. It's been, the stories have been told over and over in a variety of languages, transcribed over hundreds and thousands of years. And so the facts have gotten jumbled. And all I'm doing right now is trying to piece together what little information I do know about them. And so I'm like, all right, let's start off with the authors of the Bible. And why is it that certain Bibles or certain books were omitted? And so you go down that little path right there, and then you look at like the folks who were actually writing the like Matthew, Luke, John, all these folks right here, and I want to know about them as well. Like, how credible of a person were they, and who decides? The most important thing is who decided what goes into the actual Bible, and why was the other people? Why was their testimony not factored in, or why wasn't their testimony considered?
Council of Nicaea.
Validated.
So it was basically Catholicism took out the most, you know, the most powerful books of the Bible, in my opinion, right? So the Council of Nicaea was headed by Catholic popes, the Pope or bishops and whatnot, and they're the ones who took out the books of the Bible, like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Esther, and all the books that were removed from the Bible.
Right.
So Catholicism is it was Catholic leaders, Roman Catholic leaders, is my understanding, that took out that chose what books would go in or not. And we know that they're the enemy, right? I know that I believe that they're the enemy, right? The Roman Catholic, everything about that, they're pagans, right? And even you can even look at where they worship, and you can look at the headdresses they wear. You can look at the symbology on their outfits or uniforms, whatever you want to call them. Like, to me, Catholicism is clearly and blatantly, for anyone that wants to look, paganist.
Yeah.
So when you have them trying to discredit Christianity, again, that for me, I can see the circumstantial evidence. I can see that they're trying to bastardize Christianity, that there's an effort here, and there's such, you know, it's a war. There's such powerful entities in this world. Like, kings bow before the Pope. Presidents bow before the Pope. These are men throughout history. The papacy has arguably more power than any president has had. And you want to look at, you know, that to me means something. That to me has weight, and I have to evaluate that weight.
They're the serpent seed, and there's two explanations of heaven that kind of catch you off guard, and one of them is the wheat and the tares, because you remember that parable where Jesus says that heaven is like a man who went out and planted his field, and the workers came back and said that there are tares growing up among the wheat. And I don't know how familiar you guys are with farming grains, but they look the same. When they germinate, they look exactly the same. And even halfway through maturity, they look like a bearded wheat, right? So if you look at the grain heads, they look the same. And it isn't until maturity that you can't tell the difference between the wheat and the tares. The wheat stand upright, and the wheat bow down, and the tares stand upright. So if you look across a field, you'll see a bunch of these little tare heads poking up, and the wheat are all bent over from the weight. So in the parable or in Revelation, where he commands the angels in the tribulation at the end times to gather the tares and put them for the fire and then harvest the wheat, is because if you gather the wheat first, the tares are going to be in it, and then your grain is contaminated, right? So you actually have to gather the wheat first. So that's one explanation of heaven, that it's off, right? Because you think, oh, heaven is going to be all great, but he really emphasizes the commingling of the imposters and the authentic believers at the same time. The second one is, he says heaven is like a woman who hid leaven in 3 loaves of bread. And leaven, as we know, is sin. So you think, why would heaven be like that? But if you remember back when Abraham was visited by Jesus and the 2 angels, when he told Sarah that she would give birth next year, that those 3 loaves at that point then became the Jewish offer, like friendship offering. So when you offer to somebody in hospitality, you offer 3 loaves of bread, and today that's the tradition. So for them to hear it's like a woman who hid leaven, like sin, that you hid leaven in 3 loaves of bread, that's like offering that leaven. So when you think about those 2 things, and then the 10 toes of Daniel, where the clay and the iron, they're going to be, the seeds of men will mix or will not mix with those who are like the seeds of men. So the Vatican and the Pope and Catholicism is like the tares in the wheat field and the leaven in the bread. It's the same, they're mixed, but the enemy is right infiltrating with those.
That was her mic drop.
Sorry, my mute was on. Yeah, the Roman Catholic Church absolutely hijacked Christianity. Absolutely, 100%, in my opinion. Like that much is evident to me. And then they've just paganized it, right? They've got us worshiping on the wrong days. They've got us missing all the important events. They've got us, telling you that priests can absolve sin. It's just completely backwards.
Well, and to go even more provocative in it is the Pharisees, and the Pharisee line is of the same as Catholicism, because remember what Jesus told the Pharisees. He says, you are of your father, the devil, which means they're of the serpent line as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And they've got us worshiping false idols. Typically, I think more Catholics have a shrine to Mary than they do to, when I read the Bible, the only thing we were in the First Testament, and I think it was in Genesis, where you were told you could build the, I think it's called the menorah, right? Where it represented the 7 spirits of God. If you're gonna have any symbolism of God in your house, it should be a menorah. But I think more Catholics than anything, through having been hijacked and misled, pray to the Virgin Mary, right? Exalting her above God, which is having, worshiping a false idol, right? That's believing that Mary's omnipotent and omniscient, right? A, that she knows everything, she can hear you, and B, that she can do something about it. So, I'm
glad you said that, because I thought it was only Catholicism that had that feminine worship of Mary. I just recently learned, in the same line of the Pharisees also being of your father, the devil. Did you know that the Jews have the same feminine worship? Like, they'll go and bow to and have this fertility type of ceremony that they do at the grave of Rebecca. So remember when Isaac married Rebecca and Leah both, so, and there was fertility issues, so they actually go, the Jews do, and they'll go and do their type of prayers to her grave. And if women are having a hard time conceiving, they'll go and offer and leave little money and notes on this catacomb type thing where Rebecca was buried. So the convergence of Catholics being of the serpent seed, right, of them worshiping Mary, and then the Pharisaical Jews worshiping and offering to Rebecca, it's like the same evil infiltration of that serpent line.
Yeah.
Oh.
One of the things, talking about things like what I was looking up while you were talking about that is, have you ever seen the Jews that worship with the black cubes on their heads? Have you ever see that? And then they also pray around this and walk around this black cube. And those cubes have 6 sides, right? There's a reason for that. It's representative of the number 6, and then they all have number 6 on their head, and you see them. So, and then if you look at, is it Saturn? I think it's Saturn that has a 6. Have you ever seen the 6-sided hexagon on supposedly on top of Saturn? Have you seen that or no? I think you froze, Angelica.
Is that better?
Yeah, you're back. Have you
Okay.
you're familiar with that 6-sided hexagon, right? Of course it's CGI. They just tell us that's there, but you've seen it, right, Ranard?
Yeah.
So they expect us to believe that there's a hexagon on top of Saturn, right? Just a perfect hexagon. Yeah, there's a storm. That's a storm, right? And it's been there.
Good.
It's been there forever, and it's just a perfectly 6-sided hexagon.
So speaking of our intergalactic CGI, I know you guys have to find this just as amusing as I do, but with the China rockety stuff. We know that obviously it would not take, because it's inside the firmament, days and days or a week ahead of time for this China rocket to disassemble. So what's your take on that? You think they just sent it up, or what? Or you know, all the debris that they say is falling and it should land in Earth's orbit now. They had to have just launched it or something, right?
Yeah, I don't honestly, like here recently, I don't even follow. I'm so past that. I don't even need evidence anymore. Like there's already been, so I don't even follow like the latest SpaceX or the latest NASA. One of my buddies did send me something this morning, and apparently NASA was supposed to launch something last night, and then they canceled it and said there was hard winds and they're launching it today or something like that. But he said he was watching the launch. He was watching it and there was a line across the sky and it exploded in the debris. But then they said they did. I don't know. I could share it, but
I like reading the headlines to see if there's like secrety messages that we're supposed to counter. Like aliens should be arriving Tuesday or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. You know, Angelica, I shared with Ranard the other day. I don't know if you're ever familiar with a channel called RV Truth. Truth. That dude's smart, man. That dude has picked apart some stuff. And if you're I'll send you a link to his channel. Actually, I still have it up right here. But it's this channel right here. And it's funny because his like, image or whatever you would call this is from that movie, They Live, which is Ranard had the shirt on the other day, right? Like this guy's kind of, he never shows his own. I've never seen him. He just talks and kind of hides his real identity. But he's been making videos for years, and this dude's been woke on another level for I don't know how long. But he breaks down some stuff that I would have never caught. And I think this is all he does is full-time investigation. When you like, and there you go. You see the number 33, Ranard. Like you was asking about 33.
Oh yeah.
He goes into 33 big time. Like this has been his thing, the cult of 33. That's one of the main things he goes into is the cult of 33, and how they hide it in news to communicate with each other, with the other no one. It's a staged news, right? So and
88 also.
I didn't know about 88, but that wouldn't surprise me. But let this go into watch some of this guy's videos about the cult of 33. It's pretty impressive. Fun dude to listen to.
Yeah, there's a lot of that contrary information that's being put out there by more of a secular view. I do listen to it. I want to know what everyone's saying. And Angelica, before you lost connection, I was telling Thompson how right now I'm in a very, very exploratory mindset when it comes to I'm not referring to it as my religion because I don't like the connotation with it. Let's say my sense of spirituality. And right now I'm looking at it from more of an investigative standpoint where I've suspended my belief in Christianity. And what I'm doing is I'm really trying to justify my belief system. So I am learning about other religions. I am learning about, but primarily Christianity is on the forefront. And right now I'm in the process of learning more about the apostles. Just the people, the authors of the books that everyone has grown to believe, and I'm listening to atheists. I'm listening to people who are of Christian faith, and just getting different perspectives from it, and not just taking it from the Bible as the absolute truth. I can't do it. So it's been an interesting journey for me, and so that's why my overall demeanor has shifted, just because I'm not taking sides right now until I come across, or until I come to a conclusion that yes, this is what I believe. Right now, I can't say that I believe in the Bible. I do believe in God, but I can't say that I wholeheartedly accept the Bible right now. I'm not at a point where I know enough about it, so I can't join sides on that right now.
Interesting. That's an yeah. He was telling me about that. So, but I'm still curious. Like, I guess I didn't fully understand. Like, what made the shift? Like, what was it? Someone you were talking to, or something you?
No, you just go down these like all right. So this is an interesting book. I got a few interesting books that will always make. So this is an interesting book, Approaching the Philosophy of Religion. And so when we're looking at all this stuff, I wanted to know, hey, how did religion come about? And so I'm looking at like, hey, who are the people that came up with the idea? Because it had to come from someone. Someone at least promoted the idea of a belief in a God or a belief in a non-God. And I'm just going back and I'm just trying to figure out how this all came about. Because right now we're just taught what to believe based on information that we've taken in from over the years. I haven't gotten to this book yet. This is a rather thick book. I haven't gotten to it yet. But again, this is all just talking about like the philosophical foundations of different religions. And hearing that stuff is fascinating. So I was like, all right, in order for me to buy anything that anyone says, I need to get all of the information. And once I have that information, then I can make what I would call just a more informed decision. And while I'm on this journey, it's like, all right, I'm going to hear it, listen to it, process it, got it, good. And then I'm going to go to something else and something else and something else. And with the idea that God is, of course, still overseeing this. So it's not like something happened per se. It's more of a curiosity, of a justification of why do I believe what I believe. And, is it because of one experience? Is that enough for me to continue to believe? And it's like, no, it's not. So I am going to beat this up until I really have in my mind solid confirmation that I do believe it.
So let me ask you this, and be honest. Like,
oh, I'm totally honest with you.
I know, but where are you? I'm just curious. This is for my own edification.
Right.
Where are you with flat Earth? Is Earth flat or is it not flat? Or you're not sure about that now?
No, I do believe there's a flat Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe so. Here you're gonna. I'd be willing to bet the people you're listening to, you're going to listen to people that are going to say, I have knowledge for you. Here I have investigated the Bible and I've investigated religion, and I'm willing to bet those people are flat earth or globe earthers. Right. So how good are their investigative skills? Whereas the Bible came out right from the get-go and said,
well, I'd say like if you go into a church and you ask a congregation, hey, pastor, reverend, or you ask a priest, hey, do you guys believe the earth is flat or round? Oh, of course it's round. Yeah, they're going to say that. So it doesn't seem like you were able to come to that conclusion based off of other sciences or information that you picked up and you came to that conclusion. But for someone who never stepped outside of that and investigated other areas or other disciplines, and you just say to them, hey, is the earth, if you just go up to your average Christian and say, hey, is the earth flat or round? I'd say 9 out of 10 of them are going to say, yeah, of course the earth is round, because they've just been indoctrinated, or at least they've just always believed what they were told, and they never just questioned the Bible.
But do you believe the Bible says, okay, from the parts that you've read of the Bible, do you believe the Bible says the earth is round or flat?
I believe, based off of Genesis alone, Genesis is the deal sealer for me, man. That's it. And when you start talking about a firmament, you got me right there. Got it.
So right there, that's a lot of credibility to have. The entire world has admittedly been deceived, and the Bible has told you right from the get-go that the earth is flat. That to me is pretty. That's a big one. That's street cred right there for Christianity. You have the whole world been deceived, and the Bible has came out in the first chapter and said, this is how you know I'm true. The whole world is deceived. I'm showing you truth. You can take it or not, right? So for me, that was massive. That was just absolutely massive. I mean, there's other ways to get there, right? Like the dude who got there with Case for Christ. One of the things I recommend that you do also, and I'm sure Angelica will have her recommendation. But what I recommend doing while you're doing researching is I love YouTubing top Christian archaeological finds. You would not believe what has been found. You wouldn't. I watch them often enough, and I can tell you that some of the stuff they have found, if you'd see it, you'd go, no way. They have found people documented that just 5 years ago, 3 years ago, they thought were just made up people in the Bible. And then they find stamps, and it's not just their name, it's their name saying this person was a scribe for this king. Or they'll find Sodom and Gomorrah, or they'll find this site where they stayed at before they went up into the hill. There's so many places they found,
like even the Gihon Springs, which was the same hill that Abraham was told to offer Isaac on. Like the Gihon Springs, like at the city of David, should not physically be there, but it is right where the Bible said it should be. And it feeds, like, that spring through so many wars of the Old Testament was used as a landmark type of thing. But that's like, there's no way that terrain wise should even be there.
Or even where Moses went up to the hill and was given the commandments, they have found that it's burnt, fenced off, and it's burnt. The whole top of it. What you see is that the whole top of it is like black rock, inexplicably. It's all black charred rock, and then from a certain level down, and in all the rest in that whole region is regular colored. If you start researching, what I've found is that there's not one archaeological find, in my opinion, that disproves Christianity, but there are hundreds to thousands of archaeological finds that prove Christianity, right? So that's what I see when I research archaeological evidence. But then you look at. Mm-hmm.
Are you praying before you read this other stuff?
I'm sorry?
Are you praying before you explore this other information?
No.
I would. Because if your heart already believes in God and his divinity, I would specifically ask the Holy Spirit to give you eyes to discern as you're reading.
Well,
and then it'll just be made like black and white. It shouldn't be hard to decipher, but I would specifically ask, give me discerning eyes as I read this.
Well, and being discerning was never an issue for me. I do compartmentalize. Like my entire life is just lived in boxes. And it's labeled. That's not an issue. I can be discerning. What it basically boils down to right now is, quite honestly, time. It's like, all right, I'm reading, I'm learning, I'm studying this stuff, I'm having the conversations, and I'm at the beginning stages of this. So this is something new, and quite honestly, I don't want to pray, because that's going to influence my reading, and I don't want to have any kind of biases as I'm going through this material. I want to take it as objectively as I possibly can. So I am going to distance myself, at least emotionally, and definitely from a belief system. That's the only way that I can actually, in a fair way, judge the material that I'm looking at.
I think though, but you're saying that you do believe in a God. You're just saying you don't know if it's the God of the Bible. So pray to that God, and it can be one and the same. Or you're saying what I think what Angelica's, what I get, what makes sense to me is she's saying, pray to the God you believe in. We believe you're praying to the God of the Bible, but for you, you're still giving homage to that same, whether her and I are right or wrong, you're just giving homage to the God, right? Like, I think I personally don't, that's what I would do. Like, I would say, even if I weren't Christian and I realized there was a God, if I had a belief that there was a God, I would pray to that God. I would. Yeah. If I knew he controlled everything about what I live in, whether I have a good life or a bad life, whether I have another life, whether I have eternal life. If I just believed there was a God, I would pray to that God, because I hear you.
So I guess my issue is boiling down to, we look at all the Abraham type religions. And then you look at all of the non-Abrahamic religions, and everyone professes to have a God, right? So Judaism, Islam and Christianity, they all point to God number one. And then you got other religions, or at least spirituality practices that believe in a variety of different gods. And of course, they're all going to say that my God's better, my God's ultimate. Okay, fine. I'm not going down that path. What my belief is that there's an ultimate God, and I'll leave it right there. Now, all of the messiahs, quite honestly, I don't care. That's not important to me right now, because if we identify with Judaism, they're going to say that, oh, there's Abraham or Moses. I forgot who. But then if you go with the Muslims or Islam, they're going to have a belief in a different Messiah. And of course, you go with Christianity, they're going to believe in Jesus Christ. All right. So I'm ignoring all of that stuff right there. And I'm just saying, all right, let's look at the origins. Let's look at the people who wrote these stories, and how many of these people actually had actual encounters with, Jesus, that actually were side by side with Jesus. So Angelica, you can answer that question right there. So out of the people who wrote the Bible, how many of them actually walked and actually touched Jesus, and not something that they visualized or had a moment, so
right. So there was 12 disciples originally. Obviously, Judas had his own pretty bad experience, so we'll take Judas out because there's only accounts of him. He didn't write anything, obviously. And then Paul essentially, I don't want to say he took Judas's place, but he filled in that gap, right? So out of all the apostles that that have any writings in the New Testament, they were all martyred except for John. So martyred as in boiled in oil, decapitated, stoned to death. Peter was crucified upside down. So they all went to protect the integrity of their testimony. They could have all said, no, I'm actually not going to die. I was probably just hallucinating. I didn't actually see Jesus after the resurrection, right? But they all stuck with their testimony, and they were all crucified or martyred in horrible fashion, except for John. John, who penned Revelation, was exiled to the island of Patmos until his death. And we think, oh, yay, an island, right? But not like coconuts and hammock. But it was a really harsh island for him to live on in isolation. But he was the one that was shown the revelation sign, and who gave us what the tribulation and everything was going to be like. So he died a natural death, but obviously a really uncomfortable death. The other ones were all martyred. And then in the Old Testament, obviously Enoch walked with God and had specific encounters. Moses specifically saw God. Now, he wasn't able to see his face, but he was able to see everything else, and that's why they call it the Shekinah glory. His face, Moses' face, was shining so bright that the Israelites told them to cover his face because it was too bright for them to look at. So Moses, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, who penned all that, specifically talked to God. Job talked verbally to God. So many of these Old Testament patriarchs also had specific encounters with God.
Yeah, so
with Jesus, the incarnate Jesus.
Yeah, so think about the people who follow different cult leaders that are out there, and in their mind they believe, in, let's say, this their Messiah, whoever that guy may be, as far as, let's just say, the cult leader. And it's the same to me. It's very similar in that regard, where we are going to we believe what other people tell us. And the same thing with
none of those other cult leaders are still alive. Only one. So you're believing in a dead, or not you believing, but those sects believe in a dead cult leader. There's only one that provides one that's still living.
Right, but the idea as far as like people dying for their belief as a way to validate the truth or the believability of something, it's hard. It's hard to that's a hard thing to accept, because people die for their beliefs all the time. But it doesn't to me, it doesn't, the fact that someone's willing to die for a belief, the belief could be incorrect, at that time. And then when they get more information, then at that point they can just say, oh yeah, well, it's too late now, I'm already dead. But that's kind of where I look at when I hear about people in the New Testament, let's say, being killed, and the whole martyr deal right there. It's like, yeah, I get that right there. People are literally dying for their belief. That's what they believe based on the information that they were told, and we see it all the time right now. You just look at in current day, we're being told that these vaccinations are a good thing, or we get told a whole bunch of things, and people honestly believe it. The folks who believe in Scientology, or at least some of the people who believe in Christianity, who refuse to get cancer treatments because they honestly believe that God's going to heal them. Okay, well, they'll literally die for their beliefs. So people will do it to stay philosophically consistent with their belief system. I mean, they kind of have to. Otherwise, they would be deemed as a hypocrite.
Yep. I don't know if you ever watched Ranard. Like, one of the things that resonated real strongly with me, and I think this is stuff that, man, warrants looking at because it can change your whole belief system, is Revelation. Well, there's so many, everything I already mentioned, but Revelation, if you look at Revelation and break down those events into timelines, and someone who did that, actually many people. So like the video that I recommended, which is from Babylon to America, is just one dude who did it. But just about everyone comes up with the same thing. If you can come up with that's a coincidence, other than a what's the word for it? When you predict the future, what's it called?
A prophecy. A
prophecy, right? For me, that can't be anything other than a prophecy. When he talks about the papacy and it lasting like, I want to say like 1492 years, and that's the exact amount of time before the Pope lived and then was, the papacy ended for a period of time and then came back, and that's all prophesied to the day. I mean, exactly. And when you watch that in From Babylon to America, again, I've seen other videos that do the same exact thing. He's just one guy who did it. There was no coincidence for me there. That was absolutely definitive. There was
God even says, I will tell you specifically these things so that when they happen, you will know that I am God. And even to the very counted day that Jesus entered into Jerusalem was counted to the day, like 14,000 whatever days into Isaiah, gave it a specific count. So as these prophecies come true, there's no other way than to know that he is God. Like Damascus hasn't been leveled yet. That's about to happen. I think one of my questions for you, Ranard, as you travel this route, is if you are convinced that there is a God, like the I am, the God of gods, and you are a sinful person, what or how do you plan to reconcile with him?
So here's the deal as far as the idea of sin. I personally don't accept the label. Like when everyone's just like, oh, we're all sinners. It's like, oh, look, this is how I was born. I'm not going to I can't see myself apologizing for something like that. It's like, this is part of my DNA. Like I will never, ever apologize for being black. I will never apologize for having facial hair. This is apparently an inherent thing that was bestowed upon me without my doing or my request. So it's like, hey, do we all have the ability to create a life where
born again?
Yeah, be born again without sin. It's like, oh yeah, okay, I am. So
okay, let me interject, Ranard, 1 second, because I'll lose my train of thought.
All right, go ahead, man.
What if you're injected with something against your will, right?
Yeah.
And that something makes you want to kill, or makes you angry, makes you want to hurt people, makes you want to rape women, makes you want to far more. You didn't know the extent of this because you don't remember the time prior to that. And that's essentially what happened to humans. Our DNA was corrupted, right, during the fall, right? So putting this into an analogy, prior to you being born, your DNA was corrupted. It was injected, let's just say, to simplify it. It was injected with corrupt DNA that made you want to sin. It made you want to sin. You didn't want to sin before, but you are sinful now.
Right.
And now you're saying, well, I don't mind who I am. I like who I am. The question is, if there's a God who can change you, but you have free will, right? He made you as a creature with free will, and you're saying, I kind of like who I am. I don't have to me, it makes sense that he's saying, hey, I'll help you, but you have to ask for help, right? Like you have to accept me. You have to give me permission, because most people are saying, I like this Earth. I want to be robotic. I want to be transhumanist. I want to have a Corvette, and I want to have sex with prostitutes, and I want to do cocaine, and I want to, you know, most people are saying I want all those things, and that's not the natural order, right? Like, I don't think, we just don't realize that our DNA was corrupted. This is not how we were designed. So if what he's telling us is true, it does make sense. So the whole thing, it does come down to, the Bible does hinge on faith, right? It's if what I'm hearing is true, and to me, it's just, that's how I took Christianity. If what I'm hearing is true, do I accept God and ask for his help? Yeah. If that's true, I can say that, but I believe it wholeheartedly. But even if I didn't, I'd still go, well, if what I'm hearing is true, then I do want that. I do want to be the better person. I do want to be, if you're asking me if I can be David Lee Roth or a monk, right, and the monk's happier, I'd rather be the monk, right?
And that's why he told Nicodemus, no man can see heaven unless he is born again. And so we are born sinners. We are born corrupted. I heard it explained once that if you have a bread pan and there's a dent in it, that every loaf you bake after that's going to have the same dent. Same with Adam and Eve. Like, once that dent happened, every human born after that has the same dent, the same bent in it. And so just like he told Nicodemus, you must be born of water and spirit. Being born of water, we symbolize that through baptism, but just as you were born out of your mother through water, now you have to be born again through spirit.
Yep. You know, sorry,
yeah.
Before I forget, I'll forget. Another thing, Ranard, is like you said, well, there's all these other religions, right? Like, how do we know the Book of Mormon didn't write? How do we know in the Bible? It was absolutely fascinating. I couldn't stop watching it. It's on Amazon, called The Bible versus Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith was the prophet who is responsible for Mormonism. They had this guy had been in the book in Mormon church his whole life. This Bible, this guy who's been, priest or whatever, he's read the Bible the whole life. And they sit down and he goes, let's just have a friendly conversation to compare our beliefs. And he goes, so how do we know if a prophet is a real prophet? Well, the Bible tells us. So you look in the First Testament, and in there it says it's easy to tell if a prophet's a true prophet or not. If he's a true prophet, then all of his prophecies will come true. If one doesn't come true, he is a false prophet. So the person, the prophet for the Book of Mormon, he prophesied that there would be a church built on this land that they had owned when he prophesied it. And to this day, there's no church on that land. And it was supposed to happen by like 1920 or something like that, right? And he says, look, and it's actually in their Bible, right? In later versions of their Bible, they retracted it. But in earlier versions, so it's easy to see with enough investigation which ones are false. There has never been a prophecy not come true in the Bible, because God had said, if any prophecy doesn't come true, then that prophet was a liar.
So what about so when you look at all the prophecies in the Old Testament, and so there's a bunch of claims that were made in the Old Testament, and now we have the New Testament. The New Testament was written.
Do you know of one prophecy that hasn't come true?
Well, this is where I was getting to right here. This is what I was getting to. The authors of the New Testament. How many of these authors contradicted each other during that time right there, where they said, let's just take a look at the Jesus's revival or reincarnation, not reincarnation, but you guys get what the hell I'm trying.
Yeah, when he rose.
Resurrection.
The resurrection. Thanks. I knew it was an R word. All right, so we take that right there. So you look at the some people say that Mary, there's two Marys there, and then other people say no, there was just one Mary, and then there was a bunch of women, and there was no women. There were two angels outside, there were two angels inside. So you get all these, and they're all from different authors. And fine, okay, I just have to believe that someone at some point got their facts mixed up, and this is a blatant attempt. All right, so
no, because look at us right now. If you were to ask me what I see, I would see like 3 divisions on the camera, right? But if I turn around, what I see is going to be different than what you see, right? So if we each turn around and look around a room, I can't see what's in Bobby's room or what's in Renard's room. I can see what's in mine, but we can all see this common perspective, this common point together. So, I mean, just like a crime scene, if I'm standing underneath a traffic light and someone else is standing in a storefront, and we see a shooting from 2 different angles, we're each going to give a different report. Or if I'm standing next to someone who's talking to me face to face, and then someone sitting in the doorway, they are only going to hear part of that conversation versus not, right? So just because there's differences in the story, it doesn't mean that they're not accounting the same story. You know what I mean?
Well, what it does is it makes you question the validity of the actual claim itself, because we all can't see. It's like, hey, there was a car accident. Okay, who hit who? Oh yeah, that white car hit the red car. No, it didn't. The blue car hit that car. And then now we're getting all we know is that, hey, there was a car accident, and we don't have all the details between it, because let's just agree that there's been quite a bit of time that's gone through. And also the credibility of a woman back then really was discounted. So if Mary Magdalene was at the tomb site, who's to believe her anyway? Because back then women wouldn't have been believed. Would you say that that's a fair statement? I
think that confirms the biblical statement even more, not less. Because if you were to say a Roman centurion said this, you're like, well, you have to believe that. You have no choice. But because her statements were backed up and then later witnessed by other people, confirms that even the least of witnesses still was able to speak truth concerning this. But that would be my take on it.
Do you know how many Jesus-related messianic prophecies came true? Over 300. Over 300. And right here, this guy breaks it down. Watch that video. I've watched video after video after video of Bible prophecies where, like, a king who didn't exist, his name didn't even exist, and it said this town's going to be overthrown by this king in X amount of years, and it happens, right? And then like Jesus is going to ride in on a, yeah, yes, like
yeah.
Yep. Or
so this is where I'm getting to right now. So when I hear about these prophecies, all the prophecies were made in the Old Testament. And it seems like it's being validated in the New Testament. And what I have an issue with are well, I shouldn't say I have an issue. What I'm currently learning about is the authors, and there can be potentially some form fitting, to go back to say, okay, well, let's create this story to basically validate this particular prophecy. And that's why I'm going back. Fair. Yeah, and that's why I'm going back to look at the different authors. Mm-hmm. I'm going back to look at the different authors that are out there who wrote in the Bible, because I'm sure that there's a handful of books again that weren't accepted, to be a part of the Bible. Fine, for whatever reason, I'm not there. I'm not. It's above my pay grade. Don't know, but. It has to be, I think it's very necessary for us to dig in to find out, okay, how do we know that these prophecies are, legitimately true? Like, how do we know that? And how do we know that these things weren't form fitted? Because the New Testament, of course, the problem is that it was written after the Old Testament. So we have hindsight to go back on to say, okay, hey, look, these were the things that happened. This is what was written. And we can easily craft a narrative to support any claim that the Old Testament has said.
There are prophecies coming true today about Israel and about Israel coming back after the exact amount. This is stuff that is absolutely verifiable, and you'd have a better chance of hitting Powerball 9 times in a row. I would recommend there are prophecies coming true today about, that you can verify. You can read in the Bible that what it said about Israel coming back. No one in this world, not even a Jew, would have thought Israel was going to be a nation again, right?
And born in one day. Like, yes. So it says not only will Israel be born in one day, but she will give birth before she goes into labor. And when the negotiations were happening whether to make Israel a nation, they decided to sign the treaty of Israel before they even wrote their own constitution. So they had, after they agreed to make Israel a nation again, then they had to go back immediately and write their laws and their constitution again. So she literally gave birth in one day before she went into labor. Like, just prophesy. And so, like how you were saying, if to go back and kind of tweak the prophecies, we are in such a privileged generation, because in the book of Daniel at the end, what he was shown, I don't know if you remember reading that, but it literally made his legs weak and he became sick to his stomach, and he just couldn't keep his bodily composure together because the prophecies were just so provocative and detailed. And God told him to shut up these prophecies until the time of the end. That's us. So those prophecies were not available to most average Israelites or to Jews or even to the early Christians. And then you fast forward even more to 1947, 48 till the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it wasn't a Jew and it wasn't a Christian that found the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was a Muslim, and I'm sure on purpose, because then there's no way somebody could have said, oh, well, the Jew found the Dead Sea Scrolls and like tweaked it. Or a Muslim who would have no vested interest in having an accurate scroll of Isaiah or Daniel found in these scrolls, which happened to be the same year as the Roswell landing and Israel being born. So these scrolls that were found in the Dead Sea, the ones that Daniel was told to shut up until the time to the end, they confirm word for word what we have in our Bibles. So what was sealed up until the time of the end, that's us. And it all matches. Everything matches.
Yeah.
There's nothing that doesn't match.
Yeah. There's not, from what I understand, there's not a single prophecy in the Bible that hasn't come true. And all the ones that it laid out in Revelation, they are playing out to the T. And this is like, that's why I'm confident. This is the end times. This is it, right? And here's the thing: like, if you are researching this, I'd like get on the ball, because if the day happens, right, the rapture happens, and you haven't made that agreement in your heart yet, then you're going to be here for 7 years of tribulation. And I know this sounds like, 5 years ago, I would have said, this dude sounds like a nut job, right? But today,
hold on. Give me one. I've been drinking like 2 of these things. Yeah. I got to be right back, guys.
Yeah, no problem. So,
hey, and actually, I have to head out pretty soon too, because I got 2 little girls that really want to go outside and pick flowers.
Yeah, we did 2 hours and 22 minutes. We're gonna wrap. My wife's been saying, "Hey, can I come downstairs yet?" And I told her I'd promised her I'd take her to dinner. So
yes, we can do a group picture, a family portrait. What did you do for her for Mother's Day?
We went to the zoo.
Okay.
And then I took her for acai. And last night we went out to eat at this place called. It's like Fogo de Chao. It's like it was really expensive. It's like $120 for us to go eat. So
you guys are so fancy. We've got like a Subway here. If it takes about 30 minutes to get to town, so we could go for a Subway or Guess there's some restaurants.
Let me tell you, I don't remember the last time I spent 120 for 2 people to eat. It's probably been 5 years or something like that. I'm a miser, right? But you know, hey, once every 5 years, you know. So last night it just happened to be the one time we went out and ate fancy. If I were craving a steak, which I don't, you know, I don't eat a lot of. I eat more vegetarian and more. But if I were craving, I'd usually just go to Longhorn or something like that. But last night was a one-off. But we can wrap it up, Angelica. Yeah, we ran way over, man. I want to try to keep these under 2 hours, and we keep going over 2 hours.
Oh my God! Just looked at the time.
Yeah, but we have a quest now. We have to
I accept the quest.
Ranard back on track. But that's all right, man. We still love you, Ranard. We still want you as part of our group. And this is like a perfect. It's actually a perfect storm. Like this is some good conversation because, you know,
it's better than that. You know what this is? This is Neapolitan ice cream. Vanilla, strawberry, chocolate.
That's right.
Oh gosh,
that's what we have to offer: virtual Neapolitan ice cream.
Oh my God.
All right. We're going to wrap. Let's wrap it up because my wife's been saying she wants to go eat, and I've been telling her I was going to let her eat anytime now. So
I heard the perfect sign off from another Watchman brother. See you here, there, or in the air.
Hopefully in the air. But
I think so too.
Not next time here.
There in the air. I like that. That's cool. I like it. Angelica,
it's not mine, but we'll take it.
All right.
All right, guys. You guys take it easy.
Bye.
Take care.
Peace.
Bye.
See ya.